Welcome, everybody. We are going to be starting on story time here in just a minute. Now, remember, if you would like to see the books we are reading, as well as hearing me read them, please go to my YouTube channel, click on the bio, click on the Instagram button. It's going to give you a choice of Instagram or YouTube. Click on YouTube. Other than that, I don't really know how to help you on that one. So today we are going to be reading Curious George, Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse, and Stone of Tears by Terry Goodkind. That's about all I got, honestly. So, we are going to get started here in just a second. And then we are going to just go through with reading the books. Hi, H.A.Rey. We are doing Storytime Havoc. Are you causing trouble? Or are you, being, good and whatnot? Hi, Demigoddess. Yes, I am still doing Storytime, Demigoddess. Here's a big thing. If you go to YouTube, Demigoddess, you can actually see the book I'm reading as well as hear me read it. And we're actually doing Curious George tonight for the... I wholeheartedly approve of this, Havoc. I can't say just how much I approve of that. I really do. That is so amazing. You could always go with, Australia is designed to kill you and everyone who lives there is insane. Ooh, tell him that Vegemite sucks. Oh, I'm so sorry, Demigoddess. Are you okay? No, I understand that. If I was in and out of the ER, I wouldn't be online much either. Oh, I'm sorry. Ooh, mango. Okay, so we are going to get started with reading. ScoMo. I'm going to have to. I get that, Demigoddess. Okay, but I am going to start reading. Havoc, text me that so I can remember to look it up later. And I promise I will look it up and send you my real reaction to it. Good, Demigoddess, I'm glad. So, Curious George by H.A.Rey. By the way, if you hear pauses, it's because of the pictures. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. One day, George saw a man. He had on a large yellow straw hat. The man saw George too. What a nice little monkey, he thought. I would like to take him home with me. He put his hat on the ground, and of course, George was curious. He came down from the tree to look at the large yellow hat. George was caught. The man with the big yellow hat put George into a little boat, and a sailor rowed them both across the water to a big ship. George was sad, but he was still a little curious. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the bag. George sat on a little stool, and the man said, "George, I am going to take you to a big zoo and a big city. You will like it there. Now run along and play, but don't get into trouble." George promised to be good, lying little brat. But it is easy for little monkeys to forget. On the deck he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. He was very curious. Finally, he had to try. It looked easy, but, oh, what happened? First this, And then this. Like I said, if you'd like to see the pictures, go over to YouTube. Where is George? The sailors looked and looked. At last they saw him, struggling in the water and almost all tired out. Hi, babe. Man overboard, the sailors cried as they threw him a lifebelt. George caught it and held on. At last he was safe on board. After that, George was more careful to be a good monkey, until at last the long trip was over. George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he and the man with the yellow hat walked off the ship onto the shore and on into the city to the man's house. He telephoned the zoo. George watched him. He was fascinated. Then the man went away. George was curious. He wanted to telephone too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun! Ding-a-ling-a-ling! George had telephoned the fire station. The firemen rushed to the telephone. Hello? Hello? They said. But there was no answer. Then they looked for the signal on the big map that showed where the telephone call had come from. They didn't know it was George. They thought it was a real fire. Hurry, hurry, hurry! The firemen jumped onto the fire engines and onto the hook and ladders. Ding-dong, ding-dong. Everyone out of the way! Hurry, hurry, hurry! The firemen rushed into the house. They opened the door. No fire. Only a naughty little monkey. Oh, catch him, they cried. George tried to run away. He almost did, but he got caught in the telephone wire, and a thin fireman caught one arm, and a fat fireman caught the other. You fooled the fire department, they said. We will have to shut you up, where you can't do any more harm. They took him away and shut him in a prison. Wow, this book got dark fast. George wanted to get out. He climbed up to the window to try the bars. Just then the watchman came in. He got on the wooden bed to catch George, but he was too big and heavy. The bed tipped over, and quick as lightning, George ran out through the open door. He hurried through the building and out onto the roof, and then he was lucky to be a monkey. Out he walked onto the telephone wires. Quickly and quietly over the guard's head, George walked away. He was free. Down in the street, outside the prison walls, stood a balloon man. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched. He was curious again. He felt he must have a bright red balloon, because we all float down here. He reached over and tried to help himself, but instead of one balloon, the whole bunch broke loose. In an instant, the wind whisked them all away, and with them went George, holding tight with both hands. Up, up he sailed, higher and higher. The houses looked like toy houses, and the people like dolls. George was frightened. He held on very tight. At first the wind blew in great gusts. Then it quieted. Finally it stopped blowing altogether. George was very tired. Down, down he went. Bump onto the top of a traffic light. Everyone was surprised. The traffic got all mixed up. George didn't know what to do, and then he heard someone call, "George!" He looked down and saw his friend, the man with the big yellow hat. George was very happy. The man was at last. Away they went. To the zoo. What a nice place for George to live. And that is the end. Dirty little troublemaker. There you go, a book about a brat for all of the brats. So on we go to Percy Jackson and the Titans Cursed. Now, are you a good girl all the time, or are you just a good girl when you want to be? Is the question. Because, like, Baby Dragon is a good girl when she wants to be, but not a good girl all the time. Okay, so, on to Chapter 17. I put on a few million extra pounds. Atlas had the same regal expression as Zoe, the same cold, proud look in his eyes that Zoe sometimes got when she was mad, though on him it looked 1,000 times more evil. He was all the things I'd originally disliked about Zoe, with none of the good I'd come to appreciate. "Let Artemis go," Zoe demanded. Atlas walked closer to the chained goddess. "Perhaps you'd like to take the sky for her, then? Be my guest." Zoe opened her mouth to speak, but Artemis said, "No! Don't offer, Zoe! I forbid you!" Atlas smirked. He knelt next to Artemis and tried to touch her face, but the goddess bit at him, almost taking off his fingers. "Hoo-hoo!" Atlas chuckled. "You see, daughter, Lady Artemis likes her new job. I think I will have all the Olympians take turns carrying my burden once Lord Kronos rules again. And this is the center of our palace. It will teach those weaklings some humility." I looked at Annabeth. She was desperately trying to tell me something. She motioned her head toward Luke, but all I could do was stare at her. I hadn't noticed before, but something about her had changed. Her blonde hair was now streaked with gray. "From holding the sky," Thalia muttered, as if she'd read my mind. "The weight should have killed her." "I don't understand," I said. "Why can't Artemis just let go of the sky?" Atlas laughed. "How little you understand, young one. This is the point where the sky and the earth first met, where Uranus and Gaia first brought forth their mighty children, the Titans. The sky still yearns to embrace the earth. Someone must hold it at bay, or else it would crush down upon this place, instantly flattening the mountain and everything within 100 leagues. Once you have taken the burden, there is no escape," Atlas smiled, "unless someone else takes it from you." He approached us, studying Thalia and me. "So these are the best heroes of the age, eh? Not much of a challenge." "Fight us," I said, "and let's see. Have the gods taught you nothing? An immortal does not fight a mere mortal directly. It is beneath our dignity. I will have Luke crush you instead." "So you're another coward," I said. Atlas's eyes glowed with hatred. With difficulty, he turned his attention to Thalia. "As for you, daughter of Zeus, it seems Luke was wrong about you." "I wasn't wrong," Luke managed. He looked terribly weak, and he spoke every word as if it were painful to him. If I didn't hate his guts so much, I almost would have felt sorry for him. "Thalia, you can still join us. Call the Ophiotaurus. It will come to you. Look." He waved his hand, and next to us a pool of water appeared. A pond ringed in black marble, big enough for the Ophiotaurus. I could imagine Bessie in that pool. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more I was sure I could hear Bessie mooing. "Don't think about him." Suddenly Grover's voice was inside my mind. The empathy link. I could feel his emotions. He was on the verge of panic. "I'm losing Bessie. Block the thoughts." I tried to make my mind go blank. I tried to think about basketball players, skateboards, the different kinds of candies in my mom's shop, anything but Bessie. "Thalia, call the Ophiotaurus," Luke persisted, "and you will be more powerful than the gods." "Luke," her voice was full of pain, "what happened to you? Don't you remember all those times we talked? All those times we cursed the gods? Our fathers have done nothing for us. They have no right to rule the world." Thalia shook her head. "Free Annabeth. Let her go." "If you join me," Luke promised, "it could be like old times, the three of us together, fighting for a better world. Please, Thalia, if you don't agree." His voice faltered. "It's my last chance. You will use the other way if you don't agree. Please." I didn't know what he meant, but the fear in his voice sounded real enough. I believed that Luke was in danger. His life depended on Thalia's joining his cause, and I was afraid Thalia might believe it too. "Do not, Thalia," Zoe warned. "We must fight them." Luke waved his hand again, and a fire appeared. A bronze brazier just like the one at camp. A sacrificial flame. "Thalia," I said, "no." Behind Luke, the golden sarcophagus began to glow. As it did, I saw images in the mist all around us. Black marble walls rising, the ruins becoming whole, a terrible and beautiful palace rising around us made of fear and shadow. "We will raise Mount Othrys right here," Luke promised, in a voice so strained it was hardly his. Once more, it will be stronger and greater than Olympus. Look, Thalia, we are not weak. He pointed toward the ocean, and my heart fell. Marching up the side of the mountain from the beach where the Princess Andromeda was docked was a great army. Dracanae and Lastrygonians, monsters and half-bloods, hellhounds, harpies, and other things I couldn't even name. The whole ship must have been emptied because there were hundreds, maybe more, than I'd seen on board last summer, and they were marching toward us. In a few minutes they would be here. This is only a taste of what is to come, Luke said. Soon we will be ready to storm Camp Half-Blood, and after that, Olympus itself. All we need is your help. For a terrible moment, Thalia hesitated. She gazed at Luke, her eyes full of pain, as if the only thing she wanted in the world was to believe him. Then she leveled her spear. You aren't Luke. I don't know you anymore. Yes, you do, Thalia, he pleaded. Please, don't make him destroy you. There was no time. If that army got to the top of the hill, we would be over Luke. The power of her shield was so great that his dragon women bodyguards fled in a panic, dropping the golden coffin and leaving him alone. But despite his sickly appearance, Luke was still quick with his sword. He snarled like a wild animal and counterattacked. When his sword backbiter met Thalia's shield, a ball of lightning erupted between them, frying the air with yellow tendrils of power. As for me, I did the stupidest thing in my life, which is saying a lot. I attacked the Titan Lord Atlas. He laughed as I approached. A huge javelin appeared in his hands. His silk suit melted into full Greek battle armor. Go on, then. Percy, Zoe said. Beware! I knew what she was warning me about. Chiron had told me long ago, immortals are constrained by ancient rules. But a hero can go anywhere, challenge anyone, as long as he has the nerve. Once I attacked, however, Atlas was free to attack back directly with all his might. I swung my sword and Atlas knocked me aside with the shaft of his javelin. I threw through the air and slammed into a brick wall. It wasn't mist anymore. The palace was rising, brick by brick. It was becoming real. Fool! Atlas screamed gleefully, swatting aside one of Zoe's arrows. Did you think simply because you could challenge that petty war god that you could stand up to me? The mention of H.A.Rey sent a jolt through me. I shook off my daze and charged again. If I could get to that pool of water, I could double my strength. The javelin's point slashed toward me like a scythe. I raised Riptide, planning to cut off his weapon at the shaft, but my arm felt like lead. My sword suddenly weighed a ton, and I remembered Ares' warning, spoken on the beach in Los Angeles so long ago. When you need it most, your sword will fail you. Not now, I pleaded. But it was no good. I tried to dodge, but the javelin caught me in the chest and sent me flying like a rag doll. I slammed into the ground, my head spinning. I looked up and found I was at the feet of Artemis, still straining under the weight of the sky. Run, boy, she told me. You must run. Atlas was taking his time coming toward me. My sword was gone. It had skittered away over the edge of the cliff. It might reappear in my pocket, maybe in a few seconds, but it didn't matter. I'd be dead by then. Luke and Thalia were fighting like demons, lightning crackling around them. Annabeth was on the ground, desperately struggling to free her hands. Die, little hero. He raised his javelin to impale me. No! Zoe yelled, and a volley of silver arrows sprouted from the armpit chink in Atlas's armor. Ah! He bellowed and turned towards his daughter. I reached down and felt Riptide back in my pocket. Couldn't fight Atlas, even with a sword, and then a chill went down my back. I remembered the words of the prophecy. The Titans cursed must one withstand. I couldn't hope to beat Atlas, but there was someone else who might stand a chance. Barely survived. She had the spirit of a true huntress. You will not last so long. I'll die anyway, I said. Give me the weight of the sky. I didn't wait for her answer. I took out Riptide and slashed through her chains. Then I stepped next to her and braced myself on one knee, holding up my hands, and touched the cold, heavy clouds. For a moment, Artemis and I bore the weight together. It was the heaviest thing I'd ever felt, as if I were being crushed under 1,000 trucks. I wanted to black out from the pain, but I breathed deeply. I can do this. Then Artemis slipped out from under the burden, and I held it alone. Afterward, I tried many times to explain what it felt like. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body turned to fire. My bones felt like they were melting. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have the strength to open my mouth. I began to sink lower and lower to the ground, the sky's weight crushing me. "Fight back," Grover's voice inside my head said. "Don't give up." I concentrated on breathing. If I could just keep the sky aloft a few more seconds. I thought about Bianca, who had given her life so we could get here. If she was Atlas in full body armor, jabbing with his javelin and laughing insanely as he fought, and Artemis, a blur of silver, she had 2 wicked hunting knives, each as long as her arm, and she slashed wildly at the Titan. Dodging and leaping with unbelievable grace, she seemed to change form as she maneuvered. She was a tiger, a gazelle, a bear, a falcon, or perhaps that was just my fevered brain. Zoe shot arrows at her father, aiming for the chinks in his armor. He roared in pain each time one found its mark, but they affected him like bee stings. He just got madder and kept fighting. Thalia and Luke went spear on sword. Lightning still flashed around them. Thalia pressed Luke back with the aura of her shield. Even he was not immune to it. He retreated, wincing and growling in frustration. "Yield!" Thalia yelled. "You could never beat me, Luke." He bared his teeth. "We'll see, my old friend." Sweat poured down his face. His hands were slippery. My shoulders would have screamed with agony if they could. I felt like the vertebrae in my spine were being welded together by a blowtorch. Atlas advanced, pressing Artemis. She was fast, but his strength was unstoppable. His javelin slammed into the earth where Artemis had been a split second before, and a fissure opened up in the rocks. He leaped over it and kept pursuing her. She was leading him back toward me. "Get ready," she spoke in my mind. I was losing the ability to think through the pain. My response was something like, "Ow!" "You fight well for a girl," Atlas laughed, "but you are no match for me." He feinted with the tip of his javelin, and Artemis screamed. She leaped between her father and Artemis and shot an arrow straight into the Titan's forehead, where it lodged like a unicorn's horn. Atlas bellowed in rage. He swept aside his daughter with the back of his hand, sending her flying into the black rocks. I wanted to shout her name, run to her aid, but I couldn't speak or move. I couldn't even see where Zoe had landed. Then Atlas turned on Artemis with a look of triumph in his face. Artemis seemed to be wounded. She didn't get up. "The first blood in a new war," Atlas gloated. And he stabbed downward. As fast as thought, Artemis grabbed his javelin shaft. It hit the earth right next to her, and she pulled backward, using the javelin like a lever, kicking the Titan Lord and sending him flying over her. I saw him coming down on top of me, and I realized what would happen. I loosened my grip on the sky, and as Atlas slammed into me, I didn't try to hold on. I let myself be pushed out of the way and rolled for all I was worth. The weight of the sky dropped onto Atlas's back, almost smashing him flat until he managed to get to his knees, struggling to get out from under the crushing weight of the sky, but it was too late. "No!" he bellowed so hard it shook the mountain. "Not again!" Atlas was trapped under his old burden. I tried to stand and fell back again, dazed from pain. My body felt like it was burning up. Thalia backed Luke to the edge of a cliff, but still they fought on. Next to the golden coffin, Thalia had tears in her eyes. Luke had a bloody slash across his chest, and his pale face glistened with sweat. He lunged at Thalia, and she slammed him with her shield. Luke's sword spun out of his hands and clattered to the rocks. Thalia put her spear point to his throat. For a moment, there was silence. "Well?" Luke asked. He tried to hide it, but I could hear fear in his voice. Thalia trembled with fury. Behind her, Annabeth came scrambling, finally free from her bonds. Her face was bruised and streaked with dirt. "Don't kill him!" "He's a traitor," Thalia said. "A traitor!" In my daze, I realized that Artemis was no longer with me. She had run off toward the black rocks where Zoe had fallen. "We'll bring Luke back," Annabeth pleaded, "to Olympus. He'll be useful." "Is that what you want, Thalia?" Luke sneered. "To go back to Olympus and triumph? To please your dad?" Thalia hesitated, and Luke made a desperate grab for her spear. "No!" Annabeth shouted, but it was too late. Without thinking, Thalia kicked Luke away. He lost his balance, terror on his face, and then he fell. "Luke!" Annabeth screamed. We rushed to the cliff's edge. Below us, the army from the Princess Andromeda had stopped in amazement. They were staring at Luke's broken form on the rocks. Despite how much I hated him, I couldn't stand to see it. I wanted to believe he was still alive, but that was impossible. The fall was 50 feet at least, and he wasn't moving. One of the giants looked up and growled, "Kill them!" Dahlia was stiff with grief, tears streaming down her cheeks. I pulled her back as a wave of javelins sailed over our heads. We ran for the rocks, ignoring the curses and threats of Atlas as we passed. "Artemis!" I yelled. The goddess looked up, her face almost as grief-stricken as Thalia's. Zoe lay in the goddess's arms. She was breathing, her eyes were open, but still. "The wound is poisoned," Artemis said. "Atlas poisoned her?" I asked. "No," the goddess said. "Not Atlas." She showed us the wound in Zoe's side. I'd almost forgotten her scrape with Ladon the dragon. The bite was much worse than Zoe had let on. I could barely look at the wound. She had charged into battle against her father with a horrible cut already sapping her strength. "The stars," Zoe murmured. "I cannot see them." "Nectar and ambrosia," I said. "Come on, we have to get her some." No one moved. Grief hung in the air. The army of Kronos was just below the rise. Even Artemis was too shocked to stir. We might have met our doom right there, but then I heard a strange buzzing noise. Just as the army of monsters came over the hill, a Sopwith camel swooped down out of the sky. "Get away from my daughter!" Dr. Chase called down, and his machine guns burst to life, peppering the ground with bullet holes and startling the whole group of monsters into scattering. "Dad?" yelled Annabeth in disbelief. "Run!" he called back, his voice growing fainter as the biplane swooped by. This shook Artemis out of her grief. She stared up at the antique plane, which was now banking around for another strafe. "A brave man," Artemis said with grudging approval. "Come, we must get Zoe away from here." She raised her hunting horn to her lips, and its clear sound echoed down the valleys of Marin. Zoe's eyes were fluttering. "Hang in there," I told her. "It'll be all right." The Sopwith camel swooped down again. A few giants threw javelins, and one flew straight between the wings of the plane, but the machine guns blazed. I realized with amazement that somehow Dr. Chase must have gotten hold of celestial bronze to fashion his bullets. The first row of snake women wailed as the machine gun's volley blew them into sulphurous yellow powder. "That's my dad," Annabeth said in amazement. We didn't have time to admire his flying. The giants and snake women were already recovering from their surprise. Dr. Chase would be in trouble soon. Just then the moonlight brightened, and a silver chariot appeared from the sky, drawn by the most beautiful deer I had ever seen. It landed right next to us. "Get in," Artemis said. Annabeth helped me get Thalia on board. Then I helped Artemis with Zoe. We wrapped Zoe in a blanket, and Artemis pulled the reins, and the chariot sped away from the mountain, straight into the air. "Like Santa Claus's sleigh," I murmured, still dazed with pain. Artemis took time to look back at me. "Indeed, young half-blood. Where do you think that legend came from?" Seeing us safely away, Dr. Chase turned his biplane and followed us like an honor guard. It must have been one of the strangest sights ever, even for the Bay Area. A silver flying chariot pulled by deer, escorted by a Sopwith camel. Behind us, the army of Kronos roared in anger as they gathered on the summit of Mount Tamalpais. But the loudest sound was the voice of Atlas, bellowing curses against the gods as he struggled under the weight of the sky. Oh. I will actually be in a second if you want to go in.
Okay, are you alright with me eating a little bit too?
Yeah. I'm going to end it here.
Oh.
because there's only 3 people watching on TikTok and nobody's watching on YouTube. So, yeah, guys, that is where we are going to end it tonight.